welcome back to the Valley to Peak Nutrition Podcast. This week we have sort of a unique episode, which I feel like I say all the time, but hopefully that means that we're getting a good variety of topics to you guys, and it's not the same boring thing every single week. It's unique in a couple of ways. One is it's a two-part episode. The first part was something that we put together with some good friends of ours over at Summit Strength in a Q&A, and that covers three in particular topics that I'll tell you about here in just a minute. The second is actually a snippet from a video that I did for a client of ours here at Valley to Peak over what we call the non-tracking framework. Non-tracking framework is really just a very nerdy way to say, what do you do if you don't feel like tracking, but you still want to pay attention to our nutrition? And so in that, I cover several different things that we use, several different tips and tricks that we have found to be effective for people. And I will build and put in the show notes a brief cheat sheet covering those things. So if you want to print that off for you to have at home, you can have that. The part one of the episode where we review the three questions, cover three particular topics. The first is a deep dive into the DIY dehydrating world. So someone had asked a question about that and covered really four main important things to know if you're wanting to get into that world. With it being the middle of June when this comes out and people are starting to get into the backcountry more and more and or starting to think about and prepare for fall trips, this seemed like the perfect time to release this. So if you're interested in getting into that, we talk through four of the key things to know, and there still is plenty of time for you to go buy a machine and start getting into that if you're curious about it. We talk a little bit about the dehydrate guide that we have built for this as well. That will be in the show notes if you want to check that out and just get some more in-depth tips, recipes, and other things that we put in that. The second question dives into someone who was really interested in changing their nutrition, losing some body fat, building some muscle before several big mountain expeditions that they have on some other continents this year. Now, the biggest concern here was this person did not want to give up meals with their family, and they were looking for strategies on how to mesh the two, hit their nutrition goals without giving up or feeling like they've got to eat in some sort of a special way. And so in that, we dive into several of the key features so you don't feel like you're having to give up on either end. And then the third topic that we cover is meal prep whenever you have very minimal freezer space. Now, this dives into a few different topics. So one of the things that you'll hear me address in there is I'm not a miracle worker, so I can't make them get a new freezer. But we did talk about what to do whenever you feel like you've got minimal space. So, different episode, different topic, pulled from real conversations that we have every day in Valley to Peak. So it's kind of like a pseudo call-in show, I guess you could say. But I hope that you find it immensely helpful in whatever you are doing. And like I said, there are some resources and notes down in the show notes below that you can check out anything that we discuss throughout the episode. Hope you enjoy it. We've got three solid questions for the day. We're going to start from the first one and then go in date order and help give you guys some answers to the questions that you've got. So this is the first one. I am a pescatarian and a foodie. I love to eat food, but I'm not creative in the kitchen, and I haven't found much backpacking food that is tasty and nutritious since my choices are limited. Join the crowd. I'm considering purchasing a dehydrator and bringing my own food on the trail. I know nothing about this process, so I'm just wondering if you have any experience with this. If so, I've got a few questions. I do, and I'm going to go through. I'm going to answer your questions here, but I'm going to caveat this by saying that we have so much experience with it that we've actually written a DIY dehydrate guide. And this is a guide that is actually going to answer every single question that you've got, but others may also be curious. So I'm going to go through and answer those, and then I'll link the guide in here so you can go check it out if you get curious and decide whether or not it is for you. But it'll guide you through and walk you through everything. It's got recipes in it etc. So here's her questions. Number one, what type of dehydrator do you recommend? Space is my biggest concern. So you really have two options, two categories of options here. One is a round dehydrator, one is a square dehydrator. Now, the biggest, most notable, most important differences between these two is that the round dehydrator has a fan that does the dehydrating from the top, and then the square one has a fan that generally does the dehydrating and blows the heat in the air from the back forward. Now, this is important because when you have a fan mounted in the rear that blows the heat and the air forward, the trays are laid out in a stacked fashion. That means everything gets dehydrated pretty uniformly and is done at the same time. The round one does really well, but what tends to happen is the foods that are on top closest to the fan get done first, and then as things travel down, depending on how tall the stack is, as the trays travel down, things either take a lot longer to dehydrate, they don't get dehydrated quite enough, or you're constantly rotating the trays. There's just more involved. They both work great. The square rear driven fan tends to be a little more expensive, tends to be a little more durable. It's usually made from stainless steel. The circular ones tend to be much cheaper, but they're made from plastic and just, we have and have used both. So it kind of depends on your budget. You mentioned space. I would say that they take up maybe an equal amount of space, but the nice thing about the round one is you can take them apart. You can stack them 2 trays high, 3 trays high, 20 trays high. You can do whatever you want with them. The square ones, for the most part, are basically a very large appliance. They're not always large, but they're bigger appliance in a square form, and so it is like having one more kitchen appliance that's sitting around. Once the food is dehydrated, how do I bring it on the trail and heat it up? Once it's dehydrated, you're going to have to somehow get it into a package. Now, depending on what you make, you're probably going to have like a large dehydrated, almost like a large dehydrated sheet of plaster, and you'll have to break that up into pieces to fit into this baggie. That's what I found with almost everything. Now, you can put it in a Ziploc baggie and kind of, take a spoon from the kitchen or something and break it up too, but you're gonna have to break it up a bit because it's usually got sauces in it. Once it's in there, you're going to rehydrate it on the trail like anything else. You just put it in a Ziploc baggie. The fact that it's dehydrated is why it won't spoil. But then you're going to add, essentially 1 cup of water per 1 cup of food. So if you have 1.5 cups of food, you're going to need 1.5 cups of water. And different recipes require different ratios, but at the end of the day, you cannot mess it up. The worst case scenario is you're going to have some extra water in the actual meal itself when you go to rehydrate it, and you can just pour that off. I like having extra water. It's like a kind of like a broth that I can drink afterwards because, of our backpacking, it's in the mountains and it still is cold at night. So I would say do not be intimidated. It will take some trial and error, but you almost can't mix it up. I love the convenience of prepackaged food, but the packaging is bulky and the food is meh. Is there a special type of bag to put my dehydrated food in that can withstand boiling water? So you can buy those same Mylar bags that food companies put their food in on Amazon. You can get the exact same bag, so you can do that. They also make Ziploc bags that are boil safe. And so you can put your food in there, put the hot water in there, and it does not melt the bag, it doesn't disintegrate the bag, etc. What I often do is I just tend to cook my food in my cook pot. So I will, let's say it's a jet boil. I'll put my food into the jet boil the water, let the food cook in there, and just eat straight out of the jet boil. I'll take a dash tablespoon, 2 tablespoons, quarter cup. Afterwards, rinse it around in there, wipe it out, and it's totally fine. So there are bags, but you could also just cook in the stove itself, and it would do, pretty much the exact same thing. I would love to avoid bringing any utensils except for a long spoon on backpacking trips, which you can do with this. What meals do you recommend given my dietary limitations? Thank you so much. So, because you're a pescatarian, there are going to be a lot of limited options that you have, particularly in the world of protein. In fact, like the only thing that I can think of that might rehydrate well is that they do have some shrimp that you could use and that you could try, but tuna seems like about your best bet. Canned tuna mixed in as a part of recipes. Now, what I would probably do if that scenario is I would either rely on, forget the pescatarian part. I would probably just rely on vegetarian dishes that are a combination of grains and legumes, black beans and rice, or quinoa and lentils, or whatever. Those are going to give you a mix of the proteins you need for recovery since you're limited on protein options. The other thing that I might do is I might take tuna and make a deconstructed tuna casserole, for example, combination of noodles, sauce, peas, canned tuna. That's going to rehydrate better than obviously whole chunks of tuna. I might also do some sort of like a Cajun spicy noodle pasta shrimp type of a dish and dehydrate that. For the most part, nearly anything can be dehydrated. And so if there is oftentimes what I'll do is I will buy a boxed dish at the grocery store, right? Like take your Cajun red beans, crawfish etouffee in a box, right? Little pieces of shrimp in there, whatever. Add boiling water at home, cook it like normal, and I'll dehydrate that. I've even dehydrated cans of ravioli, cans of chili, where I did no prep work. I literally opened the can, I put it on the dehydrate tray, I put it in, and that was it. When I'm limited on time, that's what I'll do. I won't cook anything. I will just find something that I like at the store. I'll put it on the dehydrating tray, dehydrate it, get the water out so it's light enough to fit in my pack, and I'll take it to the mountains. So, like I said, check out the guide, download the guide. Um, it will answer every question that you've got. And then finally, do not be afraid to experiment. You cannot, there's almost no way that you can mess it up. Even if you leave it in the dehydrator too long, it just means that more water is getting taken out of it, which is the purpose in the first place. So you really can't. I want to encourage you just to try it because once you go down that path, I am fairly positive you will never go back. So good luck. Let me know if you got any questions if you do decide to pursue it. I'd be happy to help in the future too. I am training for both hiking and trying to lose some weight. I'm Indian and we do family style meals most nights. Do you have any recommendations on how to navigate this for my goals? Yes. So, number one, first and foremost, do not feel like and do not give up your family style meals thinking that you need to eat these isolated foods by yourself to make this happen. Now, the second part of that is the fact that to lose any amount of weight, to facilitate any weight loss, you have to be in a calorie deficit and consuming fewer calories than you were at the weight that you did not like yourself being at. Didn't mean you didn't like yourself. It just means you didn't like that weight. It was uncomfortable for you. You weren't able to maybe do things. You couldn't move as fast. Or something about that makes you want to do this, in other words, right? So remember that you need to be in a deficit. The game then becomes taking what you consume at these family meals and figuring out how to incorporate it in your day in a way that puts you in a calorie deficit. So that could mean, changes in what you eat earlier in the day until you have these family meals. It could mean modifying the portions of what you eat at these family meals. It could mean altering some of the ways you cook these family meals. Do you need a bunch of oil? Do you need a bunch of butter? Do you need a bunch of coconut milk in the curry? Do you need a bunch of rice? Maybe it's more chicken, less rice in the curry dish, right? In some way, shape, or form, every single food that we consume has a calorie content. And it is not about us mastering and finding these perfect foods and changing what we eat all the time. It's about trying to find the right dose in other situations. So, whatever it is that you guys eat at these family meals, I would use a tracker to figure out how many calories are coming in during a day. I would use the tools that we've given to try to figure out how many calories you need in a day and then start making sure that whatever the calories I need in a day line up with what I'm actually getting. And then I would use the tracker to pay attention to and to track some of these foods at family meals. It'll be difficult, but it will take time. And as time goes on, it'll get easier and easier. And I would say you don't need to do this forever. But right now, if you're new to this, you may have no clue if the amount of rice or an entree that you're eating at these family meals is 1 cup or 12 cups. And you may be thinking it's healthy and you're in reality eating 42,000 calories at the family dinner. I'm using crazy numbers to make the point. But the purpose of tracking for us is not hyper restriction, rigidity, don't eat this, do eat that. It's more about creating an awareness, right? If you don't know how many calories are in something and you don't know if what's on your plate is a cup or 5 cups, it's going to be really difficult to know if the effort that you are giving towards something is going to make a difference or an impact or not. So that's what I would say. I would say do not feel like you need to change what you do culturally or with your family or anything like that. But the fact does remain to see progress. You will need to be in a caloric deficit. It does not need to be a big one, but you need to be in one. And the only way to know that is to do an audit of your intake and then compare that audit against what you need and then make adjustments as you see fit to ensure that the goal and the outcome is met that you have. The next question. I want to start doing meal prep. I'm aiming for a week ahead for lunches and or for dinners, but I have minimal freezer space. Do you have any tips for a scenario in a situation like this? Yes, number one, I would say, well, if you have limited space, you're limited on options. So instead of trying to plan a week out, I might go fewer. What does it look like for 3 days? What does it look like for 2 days? What does it look like for less days? That's one thing that I would think of. Number two, and this is what I have found in the years of working with people, meal prep and eating in a way that they are envisioning as an ideal scenario, whatever that is almost always 90% of the time about having the food in the house, 10% of the time about actually cooking the food. So if you have a limited fridge and freezer space, do you have the room to have the constituent ingredients on hand? Just getting the stuff there into the house, even if it's not something that needs refrigeration or frozen. You mentioned you have limited freezer space, but is it possible that you have a bigger fridge? Could you get things that maybe need to be cold, but don't necessarily need to be frozen? Most stuff after cooked can stay in the fridge several days and never go bad. You might, in fact, be pretty shocked and appalled at how long we let stuff sit in the fridge before we throw it out. And, we've never had any negative impact there. But the reality is, does remain that if you have these limitations on space, you can't solve for that. So then you try to find out other workarounds as far as, okay, well, if I can get some of these constituent ingredients in the house, do I have some rice? Do I have some vegetables that, won't go bad over the next couple of days? What about fruits? Can I do a grocery delivery for every third or fourth day rather than every seventh to 10th day? Are there, looking for these little workarounds in a way that'll help you develop this, I think will be help. Third tip that I would give you is this. Rather than thinking about this giant meal prep that you've got to do and then go freeze all of these things, are there convenient foods that don't necessarily require as much preparation? For example, maybe you order a rotisserie chicken and several microwavable bags of rice and salad mix where you don't have to have frozen space, right? You're looking for convenient foods that you can prep as opposed to having all of this kitchen space to prep it and then try to freeze it. It's already there. You don't have to necessarily pre-cook it all. You take a piece of chicken out, you microwave some rice, you add a little salad mix, and it doesn't require a bunch of refrigeration and freezer space. Fourth tip would be this. Maybe you do a hybrid where 2 to 3 days per week you plan ahead, you take up and you maximize the most amount of freezer and refrigeration space that you've got on hand. You meal prep, you make for that. But then maybe the other 3 days per week, you find and you develop a list of restaurants in your area that offer foods that look like a part of a plan that you want to adhere to. What can you order there? What are two main dishes you can order there? And then you can rotate between those. I'll give you an example. We have a Chipotle that's not far from our house, and we have a Panera Bread, which is a sandwich store that's not far from our house. At Chipotle, I know that I can get the exact amount of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats that I want in a bowl or in a burrito every day of the week. It's freshly cooked, lean protein options, great carbohydrate options for training. So I can get that. That might be my Friday and Saturday meal. And then I may on Sunday and Monday, rather than meal prepping, I'll go to Panera Bread and get a turkey club sandwich with good turkey, avocado, and some mayonnaise on it, and that would be with an apple as my side serving, and that could be um, my meals for Sunday, Monday. So sometime you may not be doing this, so I'm putting you on the spot here, and I apologize. Sometimes people think that I have magic formulas for solving problems that are unsolvable. I don't. But there are workarounds. And what I mean by that is the fact that if you have limited freezer space, you're not going to grow more overnight. There's no way to work around that. You have the space that you have, and you got to work within the confines of that. But there are 4 other solutions there that could give you an opportunity to eat in a manner that you want without meaning that you got to go buy a new fridge or trying to somehow hopefully magically wake up and magically see a new freezer with much more double the square footage that you had prior to that. So I hope that helps. That gives you some guidance. If you ever have any questions, you can always send those in through your check-in in your program, or you can write those into me directly, and I'd be happy to help. I will link the Dehydrate guide with some of the other information that we talked about today, and I'll reach out if you need anything. We'll talk to you guys soon, in a couple weeks. If you don't love tracking, or if there are days that are busier than others to where you have to say, you know what, tracking's not an option today, but I still want to put some boundaries in place to make sure that I'm guiding my nutrition in the direction to achieve my goals in the given amount of time that I've given myself. Here's what I would say. So number one, the non-tracking framework is built around a series of ideas or rules that prevent us from going overboard. In other words, all they are bumpers. That's it. They are things to prevent us from going in either direction, leaving us up to our own devices. These can exist together or as individual things. So the plate dish compartment rule, bullet point 2, is basically where you've got a plate or you've got a to-go container that is compartmentalized like we were when we were kids. And you are dedicating each compartment there to a given macro or given food. Protein compartment, fiber veggie compartment, so you feel like you've actually had something to eat and you're full without blowing the calories out of the water. Carbohydrate compartment, because that is the driver of exercise and training. If you want to excel in training while losing weight, do not drop your carbohydrate content. Now, sometimes, most often, you'll see this broken up into 50%, 25%, 25%. Depending on your level of activity and training is going to depend on which compartment gets 50, which compartment gets 25, which compartment gets 25. But it could also be even 33, 33, 33. A lot of that is just based on how you like. Now, you're probably already picking up on the fact of, well, I could break up my compartments perfect, but it doesn't mean I'm going to be in my 800 block like we've talked about before, my calorie allotment a day. You're right. This is the downside to not tracking is we have no clue what's in each of those compartments, but it's very likely that it's going to be ballpark close, more so than if you didn't have those compartments set up anyway. Third bullet point. Setting up time blocks, windows, and allocations and not violating them. So this is something that we've talked about quite a bit as well, where you have this pocket of time that you've allocated to the specific amount of calories, but outside of those blocks, there's not an intake coming in. There's not random snacks. There's not, oh, this sounds good. There's not coffee drinks and frappes and lattes or beers on the weekend. It's a specific amount of calories in that given time. So this could be breakfast, lunch, dinner, and a established snack that you've already sort of said, yeah, I want to have a snack at 2 p.m. and that's what this is. It could be 8 a.m., noon, 3 p.m., 6 p.m. You could have literal times or meals and labels or whatever. But the idea there is not so much about perfecting the time or perfecting the label. It's that it puts limitations on the calories that generally come in outside of a dedicated mealtime. This is all about intentionality for this specific bullet point. The next one that you've got is rules around highly palatable foods, where you have limitations on how much is going to come in, to potentially saying, look, I'm not going to have any at all. High foods with high palatability, foods that are highly palatable are exactly what you would think that they are. Sweets, cookies, candies, chips, pretzels, bags of trail mix, Chex Mix, all of these things that they just taste good and they are very easy to overeat on, because I'm going back to an Oreo container or back to the Chex Mix bag only because they taste good. At that stage of the game, I'm not going to continue eating them because I'm hungry. If I have a giant plate of chicken, rice, and vegetables, I'm probably only going to keep going back to that as long as I'm hungry. And once I'm full, it just doesn't sound good anymore. It's easier to stop. It's easier to stay within a calorie framework around foods like that, as opposed to foods that are really, really palatable. Going down to the next bullet point, not doubling up. I put the example there of corn, potatoes, and rolls, all starches. I'm trying to carry that same theme over into every macro. I'm not going to eat corn, potatoes, and rolls at the same meal. I'm probably going to pick one. I'm not going to eat a bunch of guac, sour cream, and cheese because they're all high in fat. I might pick one for that dedicated meal, or I might pick very small portions of each, but I'm trying not to go full portions of any group that has the same macro, or the rule that we call just simply not doubling up. Then the following bullet point there, packages and bagged foods. You can either limit these or say, you know what, if I can't track today, I'm not going to get any of these at the gas station. I'm not going to lean on any of these as my main food option. I'm just going to wait until I can actually keep a good hand on this. Now, I did put a caveat there on the convenience side of things, because if my bagged and packaged food is coming from a rotisserie chicken and microwavable brown rice and a bag of salad mix, totally permissible, because that then goes back to the fact that this is not high palatability. This is just nutrient dense foods, and I'm leaning on convenience for that given days. Next one, boundaries or limitations on liquid calories. And so this would be where I say, hey, I'm either not going to have, or I'm going to significantly limit the amount of these that I would normally get. No beers for me, no lattes for me, no frappes for me, no Italian sodas for me, which happens to be my wife's favorite, no sodas for me, no anything that is liquid and has calories is very easy to pack in and without much satiety. And so if I don't feel like tracking at all or on a given day, I am going to say I'm setting some sort of boundary, some sort of limitation, or either or just not drinking at all, anything from that actual food category. And so yeah, it's, tracking is always going to provide a much higher degree of accuracy, a much higher degree of precision. And if you are tracking, I would pretty much guarantee that we can get you to whatever your goal is, because it's science and data at that point. But if there's a given day that you're busy, if there's a given week, if there's a given circumstance or situation like vacation where you can't, these non-tracking frameworks can be immensely helpful as well. And this is what it looks like in an infographic or an image. And you can see some of the pros and some of the cons down below. And you just have to decide where you sit on a scale of 1 to 5 in terms of, look, I'm very motivated and very unannoyed by the tracking, so I'm going to sit at a 5 and lean more towards that on that given day or throughout the entirety of my program. Or yeah, you know what, pretty low motivation, pretty low desire, pretty low opportunity, pretty low bandwidth, pretty high stress, so today I'm going to lean here. But the key is this, the key is that you've got something, right? There's an awareness and an intention and an attention that's there, as opposed to what most people do is when things get difficult, there's no framework. And so they just go off to their own devices, which generally leads them pulling into a drive-through, ordering something that comforts them for the day, and then repeating that for dinner, repeating that for snacks. And before you know it, they're so far off of what they wanted that they never end up seeing that goal met. So that's the key thing, is that there's something there that is at least guiding your daily decisions and putting you in the direction to where you want to be. So keep up the good work. Let me know if you got any questions. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks again for popping in this week and checking out the episode. We've been traveling quite a bit lately. We went to Tough Fest in Bozeman and a few other places, and it's always a little overwhelming in a really good way to get feedback from you guys on how much you enjoy the podcast. So thank you for that. Thank you for stopping to say hi. Thank you for listening. Thank you for everything that you do to tell us that you enjoy it, because we love doing it and we love hearing that you love it and that it's helpful. So we'll be back again in another couple of weeks with more new episodes. As always, if you have questions, please send those over to us, info@v2pnutrition.com, and we would be glad to cover the topics that you are interested in. Talk to you soon.